electric shutter doors that open when the thing turns on. And ordinarily they're closed and they have a lot of foam insulation in there. But when you turn the thing on, they electronically open it. And I would be tempted to put the thing in upside down just so I could see the doors open every time I turned it on. Of course, it'd be sucking the hot air out of the attic into the house, but, you know. Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding Podcast, our weekly discussion of building, remodeling, and design topics aimed at anybody who cares deeply about the craft and science of working on houses. This is Senior Editor Patrick McComb. Today I'm joined by our producer, Jeff Rose.
Hi there.
Green Building Advisor, Senior Editor Kiley Hvac.
Hi, guys.
Operations Manager for TDS Custom Construction, Ian Schwant.
How you doing, Patrick?
You can find previous podcasts and check out the show notes at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. Well, it is a pleasure to see you all this morning. Thank you for being on the show.
Thanks for having us.
Kylie, what have you been doing?
I did a little project recently that was very gratifying and kind of meditative. I bought 4 yards of what amounted to, on average, 2-inch gravel, so some pretty fat crushed stone, and created a parking pad with it. So I single-handedly, you know, when you have a pile of stuff to spread, you sort of figure out your method, and mine turned into a shovel, a grading rake, and a bucket, and it took me 12 hours.
I think you should have approached it differently with a skid steer loader, perhaps. But
I like that kind of work. I was happy to do it. I have a nice parking pad. It gets my car up off of the,
mud,
right? Because when they excavated to investigate my well situation, they made a big old sloppy mess of it. So it's all repaired.
So the labor with which moving gravel is directly proportional to the particle size.
Exactly,
you couldn't
Patrick.
find bigger gravel to move around?
Exactly. Totally. I'll be honest. I didn't realize I was getting something quite so big. I will be honest. I had not bought that size before. And
you
it was
bought
a mistake.
what we call riprap.
I'm glad for it, though. It feels like I have a full-on double parking spot that is lifted up off the ground, and in that wet environment feels like a good thing for my car.
Sure. I bet you couldn't walk the day after, though.
Yeah, I was pretty sore. It's good work.
Yeah, sure. Ian, can you top that?
Nope, can't top that. I spent the last weekend going around and tweaking all the door hardware at the house because now we've been in there 6 months. So I started doing kind of a mental 6 months.
Exterior doors, interior doors, both?
Both, yeah. Just making sure that everything was still latching. There was a couple of doors that had loosened up and were not quite latching like
How many doors are we talking here?
I think I did I think there was maybe 3 doors or 4 doors that I had to do some hardware adjustmants on.
How are you feeling about these callbacks?
Yeah, no, yeah, it's all on me. And then we bought an outdoor cooking stove, so I had to put that together and get it up on its stand, and had to draft some people into helping me move it because it weighed like 250 pounds. So I'm surprised.
Is this connected to your big propane bottle, I'm guessing?
It will be, yeah. We wanted to get using it right away because that's
what you do.
That's how
a
purchase like that goes. You put it together and I'll start it up and make a pizza out of it. So.
That sounds fun.
Any other projects on the horizon for you, Ian, at the house?
I think once we get back from our vacation, we'll get serious about Sarah's garden shed and greenhouse that we're going to build. A little timber frame style with a lean-to greenhouse on it. That'll be our first big one.
Are you looking forward to it after, a little break from, intensive building, shall we say?
Yeah, I am, because in doing a little bit of work at the house now, and the weekend before I'd put a dishwasher in for my sister-in-law, so it was like getting all the tools out and getting them reorganized and trying to find where different screwdrivers had ended up at the house throughout the project. So it was nice to get everything put back together again.
Do you enjoy the process of sorting stuff after the end of a big project?
Not particularly.
Yeah, I don't know.
Every time I do it, I think, why don't I just put stuff back when I'm done with it?
I remember
It'd be
when
a lot
Rob
easier.
when Rob Hvac built my little woodshed at the end of his project. He just literally just chucked everything. No rhyme or reason to any what he was doing. He just all went in the back of his element and he drove off. And I thought, I bet that's how he does it every time. And then when he goes to do a new job, he's got to sort all that out.
I remember at the end of our habitat projects, the basement will be full of mud buckets full of all kinds of tools and leftover building materials. It's everything left over and every tool that you used on the place practically. And of course, that would just all go into the truck and then get dumped in the warehouse to be hopefully sorted later.
I bet there are a lot of super organized types, though, that have their system and they have a spot and that's where they put it back each and every time so they don't have to go through that always.
I think I'd be better at it at this point in my life, but boy, it just always seemed to be the case. So I got back from JLC Live, and I'm going to share some trip highlights, some informational things. So I went to Leslie Shiner, and those of you who are in the business side of contracting will probably recognize her name. She's a consultant that helps people with QuickBooks and another software program I was unfamiliar with. But she's a very smart woman, and one of the things I took away from her presentation was that your labor burden is actually 3 times of your employee's salary, and that was a surprise to me. Maybe that's why I didn't succeed very well as a small business person. Is that a good rule of thumb, Ian, would you say?
It's a good rule of thumb for planning, but there's so many things that can go into a labor burden that it really requires a focused look at your books and how you operate.
What do you think some of the things people forget about when considering their employee costs?
Training is one thing. A lot of labor burden rates will have a certain dollar amount in there to cover yearly training. That's an often forgotten one. But usually people just stick with the insurance and the tax part of it.
I would argue that training may have multiple people's costs associated with it, right? You're a lead carpenter or a senior carpenter, and your time is consumed with teaching someone lower down how to do stuff, right?
Yeah. I've seen some people talk about how they build a labor burden number for training, and it gets pretty involved, like you said.
Sure. I also went to carpenter Brian Campbell's seminar on keeping miters closed, which is one of the more challenging things a finished carpenter is asked to do. And, one of his strategies is just try not to have miters, use cross pieces on your casing instead of mitering them. And he also talked about, exterior soffits, and it was very interesting. He was really good. He's just a great carpenter. And for those of you who are interested more on his methods, we're going to have a Fine Homebuilding feature coming up on his finished carpentry methods that are meant to keep your miters tight and your clients happy. I went to Doug Horgan's indoor air quality seminar, and I learned I'm probably poisoning myself with benzene because I share my office space with my lawn tractor, and those of you who listen to the show might take something away from what's going on here, right? So I decided to buy a cordless lawnmower and move this thing the heck out of here.
I thought you were going to say you decided to build another outbuilding.
Do you have room for that?
I did consider that, Ian. I did honestly consider that, but if you put outdoor power equipment in a shed, the rodents are going to destroy it annually, right? They're going to nest up in the little crevices, and it's really damaging. So I decided I'm going to sell it. So if anyone out there listening to the podcast needs a very fine Cub Cadet lawn tractor, LTX 1045, 42-inch deck, give me a call.
I think you should get one of those little bubbles that people put over fancy cars in their garage when they store them, that you can put over your lawnmower.
And create a negative air situation, right?
I'm surprised more people don't do that, to be honest.
Yeah.
Well, so Doug told me that folks who have internal garages often have much higher levels of benzene in their homes owing to the volatility of this VOC, right?
Wow.
So I'm sure there are lots of folks listening to the show who know way more about this subject than I do. I would love to hear about more about indoor air quality, and I'm sure our listeners would too. So that'd be a great Pro Talk guest. If you guys have questions about indoor air quality, I think that is something we should explore.
Absolutely. The next 3 months, April through June at GBA, our new expert exchange program is devoted to that very topic. So if listeners know professionals who might be interested in contributing some thoughts to that whole dialogue, please write in.
Please. As always, we heard from some folks regarding the show. Hi, all. I was surprised at the seeming lack of knowledge as to hydro air. Unless I am misunderstanding the discussion, this sounds like a smaller version of what is standard practice on large institutional projects. There is an air handler with both a hot deck and a cold deck. The hot deck is fed from the boiler, and the cold deck from a chiller. No, I am not an HVAC person. I'm a retired high school teacher. In the early 1990s, my school underwent a 4-year, $20 million renovation. I was the building level rep with the architects and contractors. During this time, I learned far more about HVAC than I ever desired. The whole project was a great learning experience for me, even if it was info I didn't really need. I have seen residential hydro air featured in several episodes of This Old House. Well, thanks, Doug.
Can I have something to respond with? Can I?
Please.
So I got thinking about that because I remember the one being, I looked it up because I didn't know anything about it. And it turns out that there's only 2 mentions of it on GBA, and there are questions in the forum. It's not an article or anything along those lines. And one of them was from a guy whose HVAC tech was pushing him to replace his steam system with a hydronic system. And the reader wrote in saying, I'm not clear why they're so keen on it, but they are, and the only thing I can come up with is that it's a more desirable type of heat from a comfort perspective, which got me going down a rabbit hole, and I found a publication from the Plumbing and Mechanical Engineer. That's the publication title. And the article is Hydronics Offer a Cool Comfort Advantage. And I'll just read a little bit of what it says. Air distribution systems take up more space and require almost 3 times as much horsepower and 3 times as much material to move BTUs around a building than a hydronic or refrigerant distribution system. This has a significant impact on the environment and higher energy consumption for the building, and an impact on the global environment to mine, process, and transport more materials to the site for comfort distribution systems. So take it for what it's worth. It's true.
And I think what they're getting at is that water as a fluid can hold much more energy, right, than air, and that's why it's used in big load applications, less so in homes.
It's also more expensive, right?
What do you know about this, Ian?
My initial reaction was, like Doug, I am routinely surprised as well by the things I know nothing about.
I love it.
Ian. This comes from Mike. Hey, podcast team. I enjoyed and learned quite a bit listening to the Pro Talk podcast interviews with Rich Lavoie and Chad from Mitsubishi. I particularly liked his wall-hung mini-split cover ideas. Several mentions of problem ductwork during those interviews and the regular podcast 443. In one or perhaps all of them, you asked something to the effect of, what can we do to improve the way ducts are installed? Mike, I think I've asked that every single podcast episode, honestly. Mike says, I had lunch with Rich Trethewey and John Sigenthaler, author of Modern Hydronics, at the old CBTC Expo in '97. So I had to look up what CBTC stands for, and what I came up with was the computer-based train control seminar, which I don't think is what he's talking about. So anyone who knows what that is, I'd love to know. Rich pointed out that in the early 1900s through the 40s or 50s, that 30% of the cost of a new home was the heating system. Then as the cost of equipment came down and other costs went up, homeowners and buyers no longer valued HVAC. Then came the race to the bottom. Rich's insight and reflection won't change ductwork, but it does illustrate that homeowners don't place high value on something they don't see, even if it impacts their comfort, well, at least not until it doesn't work at all. Homeowners usually don't know what they're getting when they buy an HVAC system package, and they wouldn't know a good design or installation from a bad one. I truly believe the only pathway to good ductwork is minimum building code enforcement. First, every house needs a blower door test, whether it's a new home or an existing one. The IRC requires the HVAC system be sized to meet Manual J. In order for that calculation, the modeler needs to know the air leakage rate, insulation levels, surface areas, the window's U factors and sizes, and other inputs. Second, a Manual D needs to be made to size the ductwork for a system. Third, a Manual S needs to be followed to match the equipment to the J and D. Finally, those calculations should be reviewed by a mechanical inspector prior to issuing a permit for a new or replacement HVAC system. Education, complaining clients, and your disgust on the FHB podcast won't change much in the realm of ductwork, but following the code minimum requirements will improve ductwork and system sizing. When I build a home or major reno where the HVAC system will be upgraded, I gladly pay $750 to $2,500 for a qualified mechanical contractor to review the plans, make calculations, plan the ductwork layout, size the equipment, and advise our installer. The engineer's fee more than pays for itself and my peace of mind. The builder remodeler is ultimately responsible for decisions, and if the HVAC system doesn't perform well, we're the ones who get the call. I have a feeling that Rich's company takes the time to do an energy audit of existing homes and then designs replacement systems to suit. That's rare from what I see. Please continue to complain about ductwork and typical HVAC installations and add, we need more code enforcement to your plea. Mike Girton.
Oh, that's for Mike Girton?
Yeah. Well, Mike, we need more code enforcement is what I'd say.
Yeah.
I thought his point about in the 1940s or 50s it making up 30% of the cost of a house was really, really interesting to me.
I think it's not so surprising because in those periods, people just tried not to freeze to death,
right.
you know.
Yeah.
Comfort was waking up
harder
in the morning.
to get.
Yeah. So what percentage of your clients' budgets are dedicated to HVAC systems, Ian?
That's a good question. On remodeling, it really varies by the type of system that's there. And then for our high-performance homes that we have in design, we're going to work with Mitsubishi to try and figure out what the right system for them is. And then being in the climate zone that we're in, where we have to design to -11, that we have to have the secondary system as well. So it's making sure that we cover both bases.
I got to imagine that those percentages have gone up since, you know, Mike talked to John Siegenthaler and Rich Trethewey in the early 90s.
Yeah, especially the complexities of the systems at this point, right?
And I think everyone expects, you know, comfort year-round, heating,
right.
cooling, you know, everywhere.
I think the thing to keep in mind, or what sticks out to me about the 1950s, was your labor and materials to build the structure would have been relatively inexpensive. So whereas now all the labor and all the materials are very expensive. So I would think that the HVAC system for a house now may be as little as 10% of the cost of the build.
I got to imagine that when these two gentlemen were talking about what a system used to cost, you were talking about a boiler with radiators and someone to run all the piping. But then in the 50s, you had this like box that you connect gas to and electricity, and you take this tin and you stretch it out. You know, it's just a less expensive system, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
Part of it. So this comes from Joey. No, I'm sorry. This comes from Trey. Hi, FHB. I completed this deck project and was wondering if your team at FHB provides critiques, suggestions. Oh, boy, do we. I think it's beautiful, Trey.
It's fantastic. I love it so much.
Kylie, do you want to try and explain what Trey
to
did?
explain it. Yeah. It looks like he's got full-on timber. I mean, that... What do you think he's used there? Well, yeah, rocks. So he's just, I would use the term scribe. Maybe you guys could correct me if I'm wrong, but I would say that he scribed essentially almost full logs onto stone that he clearly collected from the site, big boulders, so that the deck surface, it's super simple. It's I don't know how they're fastened together. How would you suggest that they're fastened together, the decking material?
My guess is big spikes. They're half logs nailed to
logs,
nailed
okay.
to like joists on like a rock outcropping.
It's so beautiful. It's
so beautiful.
It's so native looking. I mean, it just looks like it sort of appeared there with not much effort, but I'm sure it was really tricky to do that scribing.
Yes, that is a mark of a good carpenter.
Yeah.
We had a piece in Fine Homebuilding about that very task, about how someone used like bundled bamboo skewers to like reproduce the impression of a sticking up stone to cut a corresponding wood post to fin on. It was very cool.
I have to admit something. I thought before I scrolled through the entire set of photos, when I first, he starts off with his finished product. So I thought, wow, way to work with the environment. He just built right onto those existing stuff.
But that's a skill too, right?
That's what it's supposed to look like.
Yeah, it looked like it grew there.
Yeah, exactly.
This harkened to me some of the projects I've seen done by the Civilian Conservation Corps as part of the New Deal.
Cool.
In Vermont, they cut the ski trails on Mount Mansfield, and there are state parks all over the country that have these structures built by the Conservation Corps. Very
so
cool stuff.
Those half logs. That must be expensive, huh? Order that.
I'm
right
guessing
now?
they came from the property. They look like red pine to me, but I don't know. Anyway, Trey, looks fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Did you get to see that, Jeff? I think that's your deck solution. Just getting those logs up there would be easy, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
This comes from Joey. Hey, podcast crew. Love the show, guys. I'm in the early stages of constructing my family's new home outside of Houston, Climate Zone 2. I'm curious if I could use cedar breather product from Benjamin Opdyke under the asphalt shingles to create a drainage/venting space above our unvented, conditioned attic, which will house our mechanical systems. I'm comfortable with the insulation and vapor diffusion port details of the attic roof as laid out by Joe Steebrook, but I'd like to vent the roof itself. The roof is quite large, and with the material cost being so elevated, adding furring strips and a second layer of zip or OSB isn't in the budget. I looked online but couldn't find any insight on using cedar breather with asphalt, which might be all the insight I need. Thanks for everything you do, Joey. So what do you think about this, team?
Well, I just got back 5 replies. I put this post on GBA asking.
I bet I can guess what they say.
Go ahead. What do you think they said?
This is a bad idea. They
just can't figure out why why would you want to do that?
Because the roofing nails are inevitably going to pull through the shingles. When they're not tight to the roof, that is exactly what happens. And anyone who's like tracked down a roof leak over like a big buildup of felt paper or what have you will agree with me that this is a bad idea.
So what's his solution?
Well, I'm glad you asked, Kiley.
That's not it.
I would suggest that Joey look to architect Peter Pfeiffer, who uses Galvalume on top of Texas roofs with angled battens, which allows some venting. And he claims that that is a huge help in reducing attic temperatures. I would say that the Florida Solar Institute, and I'm sure I'm butchering that agency, forgive me, has done some research to say that like these vented assemblies, while great in principle, don't really help much. What do you think, Jeff or Ian, Kiley?
I was right with you on the pro talk that you did with Peter, because that was where he talked about it, right, with the radiant barriers and the Galvalume.
He's been preaching this for a couple decades at least.
We have a full story on the development of his whole roof system.
Yeah, that just seems like the way to go, even if it is a little bit more expensive than going with the asphalt.
That's kind of this whole situation, isn't it, for him? Did he say furring is like out of the question, the materials cost alone, and the labor, of course. So that's not really a solution for him because
so he needs roof sheathing, right, no matter what assembly he has. Okay, so that's going to work under the shingles and the metal roofing. And then he needs battens, which, yes, is an additional expense. I don't know if it would cost as much as cedar breather, as an example. Of course, the Galvalume roofing is going to cost more than asphalt shingles, but it's also going to have a much longer lifespan, on the order of decades minimum in the dry. He's in Houston, so it's very wet there. So in dry places, it lasts forever. In fact, in the dry Rocky Mountains, they have uncoated steel roofing because it's an aesthetic choice. It gets this awesome rusty patina.
I have another little piece of advice from Peter Engel. He says, I may be confused, but why does he care about venting under the asphalt shingles? I think there have been plenty of tests showing that asphalt shingles do fine over unvented roof assemblies, even in hot climates. Specify high reflectance shingles to keep them cooler. A vapor diffusion port would be helpful to release humidity from the roof assembly if vapor permeable insulation is used.
Bam.
Bam.
Mic drop.
I sent this one to a couple of the production guys here at TDS too, and they all came back with various versions of creating some kind of a venting channel underneath the roof decking by like putting battens on your rafters or your trusses to create that continuous air
That's
gap.
for drying, though, not for cooling. Am I
True,
correct in that?
yeah.
Is that correct?
I believe so, yeah.
And he doesn't want to buy battens, period. These solutions aren't solutions if he's not able to buy the material,
True.
right?
Yeah.
Joey, just put the asphalt shingles on the sheathing and get on with your life.
There you go, Patrick.
And like Kiley mentioned, use a lighter color or more reflective color.
Research has
shingle.
demonstrated that is really the way to lower the temperature of the shingles, which arguably makes them last a lot longer.
It's so unfortunate that it's the aesthetic that gets in the way of that every time.
What? That people don't like
People just
light
don't
colors?
like light-colored roofs, generally speaking. I don't know why.
Well, they get dirty, and
suppose,
there's
yeah.
this like specific algae that makes these black stains that people really just don't like.
That's fair.
I can tell you that the white 3-tab shingles that my dad had the roofer put on install in my parents' house in the mid-'80s are still performing flawlessly.
Huh.
And admittedly, they don't get, shaded by trees or anything. They have a chance to dry out, but they are, and when I see old 3-tab roofs, they're often light colors. It's very odd. Well, we will be right back with more questions right after these words from our sponsor. Finishing your basement is the fastest and least expensive way to add living space and value to your home. And to do it right, you'll need basement doors and egress window wells. Bilco basement doors and window wells add light, ventilation, and code-compliant emergency egress to lower-level living areas, making them as warm, safe, and comfortable as any room in the home. Basement doors are available with a factory-applied powder coat paint and finish in a number of standard colors to complement any home. To learn how to get more out of your basement with Bilco products, visit bilco.com. If you run a home service business like painting, contracting, lawn care, or cleaning, your to-do list is endless. From hiring staff to mountains of paperwork, not to mention doing the actual work that pays the bills. Jobber is a mobile and online app that helps you organize your business and look professional. With Jobber, you can quote jobs, schedule your crew, invoice, and get paid all in one place. Try it free today at getjobber.com/finehomebuilding. Well, we are back, and so this next question comes from Doug in Potomac, Maryland. He asked, why don't people just extend their 10 to 15 mil subslab vapor barrier underneath their footing and tie it into the external foundation/wall air barrier? This could be accomplished by laying out a 6-foot strip of poly/stego underneath the footings before the concrete and then taping later to subslab vapor retarder and the exterior foundational waterproofing. This immediately prevents any vapor entry, water wicking up the foundation wall, and any radon entry into the basement. It also eliminates any thermal bridging by allowing 2 inches of insulation or 2 inches of insulation isolation between the side of the slab, the footing, and the vertical foundation wall without ever worrying about water, vapor, radon entering at the perimeter. Okay, so Ian, can you explain what Doug is pitching here?
So he's pitching that before you would even form and pour your footings, you would put this, your vapor barrier, be it, I think he calls out the stego wrap, put that down before you would pour your footings so that you can bring that up alongside the footing and then tie it into your Subslab poly, and then also bring it around on the outside to tie it into your exterior waterproofing. I did something very similar with my waterproofing, but I put it over the top of the footing after we poured it.
So it's under your foundation wall?
It's under the foundation wall, so it does the capillary break that Doug mentions in the email, but it was from an order of operations standpoint, it made more sense to me to do that rather than to have something laying down that you'd be walking over and putting your forms over and potentially damaging during the concrete pour process for your footings.
Is there less risk of damaging it when you're setting formwork for the walls?
What I used was the actual waterproofing membrane, so it was kind of like a ice and water type product, and we found that it held up really well as we were setting our wall forms.
Kylie,
you couldn't drag wall forms across the footings, that would rip it up, but if you were just setting the forms as you normally would, we didn't have any issue.
Kylie, have you paid attention to the conversations about this subject on GBA? Have you seen any of this topic?
You know, not enough to speak about it fluently or articulately, but yeah, certainly it is something that is talked about regularly. But there's just so many differing opinions and approaches and factors to consider that I can't really sum it up.
We should point out that the mechanism that Doug is pointing out here is your footing is in contact with the soil, which has a lot of moisture in it, right? And it is constantly sucking that up and is respiring it into your basement, the right word? Anyway, it's giving it up to the basement. Mm-hmm. And if you can stop that movement with some kind of vapor barrier between the footing and the soil or the gravel that's under the footing, you can stop this mechanism and make your basement drier. And I think this science is completely valid. And I know there's been some different ways to do that mentioned on GBA, Kylie. One is like one of your contributors actually rolled on a product, I want to say, or in some cases, right?
I know Ben Bogey's on a project right now where he's using liquid applied flashing for this detail. Yeah.
I think it makes perfect sense, Doug.
Yeah, it does.
Why don't we do it? It's like one of those eternal questions, like why we don't do a lot of good things that are a lot of good practices, right?
You know what? Ben actually has the same crew that comes in to do the waterproofing of the foundation walls does that detail at the capillary break. So it's kind of like a one-shot deal where he gets both those things accomplished.
Well, and that might be part of the answer, Kylie, why this isn't done regularly, because it's no one's job, right? It's not the foundation crew that's doing the footing. It's not the excavator's job. I guess that falls to the GC as it does, right, Ian, when things aren't anyone's job?
Right, yeah, and then it's making sure that you have the right people on site for that order of operations. Oftentimes your footing guys might be right on the back of your excavator waiting for them to get the hole finished, and then they're right in there immediately getting their footing forms done. So you don't necessarily have that break to get somebody in there and make sure that you have the material, which would, if you're trying to order something like Stego wrap, which may have a longer lead time than just your poly that you can pick up at any home building goods store, having that there earlier isn't necessarily on the mind of your project manager.
Sure. I would like to hear from folks who do this detail. How do you do it? Makes a lot of sense to me for the reason Doug mentions. And
the waterproofing detail that I did for my basement, I'm really happy with. One of the things I did last weekend was crawled under the stair landing where my sump crock is, and it was taking on no water. There was just a little bit of dampness at the bottom of the sump crock, so I'm really happy with the performance of the extra work that I did on the foundation waterproofing.
not only is it an energy savings to not be running a pump, but it's a reliability thing too, right? Like so often when you need to pump out your basement is in bad weather, and that's when the power goes out.
Yeah, at our house in New York, we had a very small basement that was, I think, when the house was converted from a carriage house to an actual house for people to live in, they just dug a small pit basement, which was maybe only 6 feet deep and, at most 8 by 8. And that would regularly fill up during storms when we would lose power in New York. And then you'd have a swimming pool in your basement. That happened to us a lot.
That is such a drag, man.
Yeah.
How do you dry that out then once it gets flooded?
Yeah, you go to the store and you rent a pump and you pump it into your yard, and then it goes into your neighbor's yard. And
I don't know if it's Connecticut only, but everybody should know this. Check with your state fire department to find out, or your town fire department to find out. They will provide instructions and equipment to pump your basement. So they'll come over, get you set up, and show you how to do it, and leave you with the equipment for as long as it takes, and then they'll come and recollect the equipment. I think that's awesome.
Oh boy, can I just
that's
do that?
Yeah, you can. You can. My neighbor did it when we got flooded this past summer. Yep.
Yeah, that would have been helpful to know, because I think I had to do it a couple of times while we lived in that house.
Yeah, I'm glad to know it.
Jeff, what do you think about this detail? Is this something people should worry about?
Yeah, it's kind of a new thought to me. I hadn't really thought about it before, but I think
Doesn't it make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't remember where I got that detail from, if it was Christine Williamson's Instagram maybe, where I first saw somebody doing the capillary break over the top of the footing. I feel like it may have been her Building Science Fight Club Instagram, but it was one of those things that was just super important for us with having 2 bedrooms on that lower level to not have any moisture issues like many other basements in our area do.
Unlike most water vapor things, like this particular mechanism works year round, right? It is, some things happen in the cool weather or the hot weather, depending on where you live. But this one, no matter what season it is, this is always putting moisture in your house, and it can be a lot, is from my understanding.
Yeah, especially when you have really dense clay soils like I have around my house. A lot of standing water. It takes a long time for the water to drain away.
This puts me in mind of a post that's coming up tomorrow on GBA. I'm working on it right now. It's from Randy Williams. It's his barn dominium project, and he's creating his capillary break under the footings with spray foam, open cell spray foam, and he has his reasons for doing that. One of which is his argument.
Go ahead, come on, let's throw Randy under the bus.
No, his argument for using spray foam. I'm not necessarily sold by the number one reason is it's fast.
Well, geez, so many things are done for that reason, Kiley.
It's just like that, and I'm not a builder, and I don't have people's money weighing around my neck, so I've got to reserve judgment. But when that's the number one reason, but he also, one thing I want to get, this is a little bit of an aside, but it's related to this detailing of the footing. The slab itself has an edge. He uses the spray foam for both subslab insulation, under the footing insulation, and also the thickened edge insulation, or the wing, right? And it wound up getting damaged from some equipment on site. And so he said, in retrospect, he would probably use rigid foam board for that application, but I don't know. Do you think that rigid foam board would be less likely to be damaged from a big piece of equipment driving too close to the house?
I think if the ground is prepared adequately under it, I think it could be okay, because some of it has pretty high compressive strength. But I would be tempted to wait until, on a barn, on a post frame building, which is big, you're going to need a lift to put the siding on it. So of course you're going to have heavy stuff driving around the whole perimeter of the building. Or you get a bucket lift that you could keep away, maybe. How do you do that, Ian?
Do the edge insulation?
Yeah, and side big honking building like that.
It really depends on what material you're using, right? Like, is he really going for the real barn dominium look, and it's going to be the agricultural steel panels, which you can do those off of your bucket lift pretty easy, or is it going to be more conventionally sided, where you are going to have scaffolding and installers stomping around the whole time around your building to do it?
All,
Things
complications of
point,
exterior insulation. It's a hassle.
Yeah, to your point though, Patrick, you're building a giant building, so you've got to build it in a way that people can work on it.
This is a great question. This comes from Mark. Hi, Patrick and FHB podcast crew. Every spring, I swear I'm going to install some attic fan-type ventilation in my home to exhaust the summer's heat while drawing in Vermont's cool evening air. I've yet to bite the project bullet, however, because the need to punch a commensurately sized opening in my home's building envelopes to ventilate that exhausted air. Cutting a 2.8 square foot net-free area hole in my weatherized, dense pack, cape roof, ridge and soffits, vent plug, basement box, still foamed house seems nuts. Woo! That was quite a sentence, Mark. So here's the question. Am I nuts to consider it? A ventilation contractor colleague of mine who I consulted about the project said to me in his best Brooklyn accent, Forget about it. Buy an air exchange heat pump instead. I remember my grandparents' home where a window fan was turned on to exhaust mode after all but one window was closed to the outside. I can still hear the roar of that ancient Hunter fan as the hot air fled the house. I keep imagining one of Tamarack Ventilation's 1,600 square foot or 1,600 CFM energy-efficient whole house fans with self-sealed insulating shutters open in my second floor ceiling, perhaps paired with a Vermont lazy window in the gable roof, open in summer, closed in fall. Do you guys know what a Vermont lazy window is?
I had to look it up. I'm glad you brought it up. What do you think of that detail?
Well, we should tell folks what we're talking about.
Right.
I've had to explain this a number of times, so I'll go.
Okay.
So you have a gable end. You have a smaller gable attached to the same wall. And there's usually a couple feet, maybe 30 inches between the lower gable roof and the eave of the larger one. And here you put a sideways window. It's not exactly sideways, but it's leaning
diagonal.
lazy.
Yeah.
I've also heard them described as witches' windows and working man's windows,
and
too.
coffin windows.
Coffin windows?
Yeah, there's
Why
some theory.
That one, Kiley?
Because there's a theory that it was a way in which to eject a coffin out of the second floor down the valley to the ground.
I think Vermonters are practical enough to just do that, of course.
It's an interesting look. I don't know. It definitely has that sort of like cockeyed. I don't know. There's something kind of strange about it.
So my question is whether a whole house ventilation strategy is totally at odds with the goals of building performance and energy efficiency.
No.
Is a higher tech solution like an air exchange heat pump the only means to achieve what you and Kiley call climate resiliency? Thoughts, Mark? All right, so I want to talk first about the Tamarack Technologies whole house fan, which is an absolutely beautiful piece of engineering. I've seen it at trade shows. And perhaps its greatest feature are the automatic little electric shutter doors that open when the thing turns on. And ordinarily they're closed and they have a lot of foam insulation in there. But when you turn the thing on, they electronically open it. And I would be tempted to put the thing in upside down just so I could see the doors open every time I turned it on. Of course, it would be sucking the hot air out of the attic into the house, but So anyway, what do we think about this idea? Jeff, you've talked about whole house fans, I believe, on the podcast before. In
a tight house, I don't think that it makes sense. I mean, it's completely uncontrolled.
And who else wants to go?
Well,
I'm waiting to hear what you and Kiley have on this one.
Well, just to get at his question about cutting a huge hole in his super tight roof, I am hard-pressed to think of a builder who would recommend doing that. So, agreed, that's not a good idea. Do you guys agree?
Yeah.
Well, I want to talk about why you would be tempted to do this. So, when this thing is running at full tilt, it uses 230 watts, okay? A 1000 BTU mini split uses about 600 watts most of the time. It can use a lot more if it's running full tilt. So, you know, is the savings really there? I don't know. And this fan doesn't have any dehumidifying capabilities, right? And so in the summertime in Vermont, when the temperature goes down, there's a lot more moisture in the air, right? It's and you can see this because it'll condense on cold surfaces. So now you're bringing this moisture-laden air into your house. And I'm sure it works sometimes, but I don't know. It seems like most of the time it's not going to be the right conditions for this to effectively cool your house and lower humidity.
I would also like to address this question of whether balanced whole house ventilation is at odds with energy performance in a high-performance house. And I would say no. Most high-performance builders and designers that I know recommend balanced ventilation systems, that ERVs and HRVs, ERVs in particular, would help with the high humidity factor. I would say that that's the way to go, and that there are some excellent resources to get you started down that path on GBA.
You mean with regard to ventilation strategies?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
the drawbacks of, exhaust only or supply only. And anyway, Ian, you're being quiet. I keep waiting for you to jump in.
Ian knows that this wouldn't work in the Midwest. Am I right?
I never saw one of these things installed until I moved to the Northeast.
Oh, okay.
To be perfectly honest with you, the first time I was in an attic and there was one of those, I think it must have been with Mason or Dave from HVP, and I think I said to him, "What in the hell is that fan doing in the attic?" Mm-hmm. It's not part of our building lexicon here. But to the point Kiley just made, the HRV that I put in my house, which is just a really basic, inexpensive one from Honeywell, I can control all the airflow of both fans and balance it myself. And I changed the settings on it during the winter. When it got a little warmer out, Sarah made the comment about the quality of the air in the house. So I went down and turned it back up. So it was, bringing in more air from the outside and making it more comfortable. So the dynamic range of a HRV or ERV to me just makes one of these whole house fans just not seem like the right application.
I can't speak for Mark, but I think he's going for cooling, less ventilation for indoor air quality, right? And I love the idea of this, but I think if you live in the Mountain West where it's very dry, it would work great, and you have cool evenings, but Vermont's pretty humid. I don't think you want to be sucking that humid air into your house if you're trying to keep it comfortable.
Because that's all you're doing, right, is just taking the air that's in your house, blowing it outside, and allowing that negative pressure then to bring air.
Which admittedly is cooler, right? That's the
Right.
rationale, but it's also full of moisture. I would buy some other Tamtech product instead. They make awesome stuff. Their ventilation equipment is top notch. They make cool timers for bath fans that allow fans to run at low speed for ventilation applications, and then you can turn them on boost. It's a great company. They make good stuff.
I'm surprised that brand doesn't come up, manufacturer doesn't come up all that regularly in
It's a small company.
Yeah.
But you think
make
this
an awesome
application is more designed for dry areas like in the Mountain West?
Yeah. They make a cool cape damper, which is like a little piece of fabric you put in a duct for makeup air, and it keeps it going the right way. It has very little resistance, which is a really neat thing. All right, one more question. This comes from Jesse. Hi, FH3 Podcast. After getting married in a couple weeks, my fiance and I will be living in a home where there is no door between the master bedroom and master bath. We both work in healthcare and wake up at about 4 a.m., but don't always work the same days, so I'd like to add a door to separate the bathroom so we do not disturb each other on those days we work different shifts. However, the wall leading into the bathroom has a decorative pop-out about 6 inches from the wall The entrance is about 3 by 9. So the pop out and the size leaves me unsure how to separate the bathroom from the master. Please help. Thanks, Jesse. Okay, who wants to try and describe this decorative detail on this master suite?
Do you think it was always
yeah.
like that, Patrick? Or do you think somebody, got DIY design crazy and created that?
It's a little
It
strange.
seems so strange.
It is strange.
Let's try and explain to folks what this looks like, because it is unusual.
It's like the door frame almost stands out about 6 inches from the wall. Right?
It's like pilasters, right?
Yeah.
Kind of oriented, and the base wraps around them, and it looks like it has bullnose corners on it, right?
Yep.
I bet I can guess when the house dates to. This looks like it came from the 90s to me.
It has like a Las Vegas casino kind of like feel to it to me, with the way that they put the little base molding going around the bullnose instead of having the bullnose piece come down square at the baseboard level.
You think it was just ornamental?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it was made to make the, opening have more presence, to give it some gravitas.
to make sure you knew that's where the bathroom is.
I think the fix is pretty easy. I think
Yeah.
you need to put a door opening with a jamb, and then maybe some quarter round or some kind of decorative trim on the jambs, right?
Yep.
And fit it inside that opening. Does that sound legit, everyone?
So
That's
in the
exactly
end,
what I thought.
it will be flush with the wall or not quite flush?
So if you made it flush with the way the door swung, you could open it the whole way. If you kept it interior, it would only open 90 degrees or maybe even a little less, right? So I think that's an aesthetic choice. I think it would look best if you kind of centered it maybe. But
Yeah,
the
I
door's
would try
definitely not
and-
going to open as wide.
I would try and center it, like you said, Patrick, and then have the quarter round or some other kind of very thin piece of trim make up your margin around installing the door in that drywall frame, and just leave all the corner bead detail
mess with
and
that.
everything. Leave it all as is, and have a transom made for the top of it, because I believe you said it's 9
9
foot.
feet.
Yeah.
I think that would look great, and it'd solve your problem. You may
And
have
if-
to custom make a door or cut one down,
Right.
or the opening is unlikely to be a standard width, rough opening or finished opening.
Well, if it's a 3 foot wide opening, I think is what he said, that would be close then to a 210 door frame when it's pre-hung. So you could get pretty close, I think, with just a regular 210 pre-hung door.
210 is pretty odd, right? It's not it's not unheard of, but that's a weird size.
I know
In
it's
my-
a weird size because I accidentally made the toilet room door in my house a 210 door. And then my building material guy was like, yeah, you got that one special order door. I have no idea when we're going to get that. And it's like, special order door? What are you talking about? He's like, yeah, you got a 210 in there for some reason. It's like, oh, I didn't even think about that.
I don't know why that one is an oddball, but that's what I remember from the lumberyard too. There's really few options in that size.
Yeah.
Jeff,
The
go
other
ahead.
thing I would suggest he does, if this is a rental and he doesn't want to go to that extent, is just put a shower curtain or maybe some sweet 1970s beaded curtain in there, just to dim the light when you go in it.
Not going to help with noise though.
No, right.
Banging
True.
around in the medicine cabinet and yeah. Any thoughts on this, Jeff?
Not really. I mean, other than wanting to rip it all out, but that's just
You would
me.
be tempted to rip the whole thing apart. I don't know. It's houses are, they look to their era, and I think that's kind of cool.
I wonder if there's other door openings in the house like this, because looking at it again, it makes me think that they did this as like a cased opening detail, as opposed to just doing a regular drywalled opening for some reason.
One thing I I did think about, but not too in depth, was that there might be pipes hidden in one of these, like, kind of pilasters. I don't know where they would go, but, you know, it would be an effective way to hide that. So we should suggest that Jesse just tear into that. And
just so we know what's going on in there.
Just get a Sawzall and just lay into the top and bottom of that thing.
And just see where the demo work leads you, and maybe it'll lead you to a kitchen. You never know.
Know where the water shutoff is. Is my advice. Oh my God. Well, I wanted to get through the show before I brought this up, but we lost a dear friend, and Fine Homebuilding also lost a dear friend. Andy Engel died last week bicycling, and our deepest sympathy goes out to his family. They are supremely sweet people. Andy's orbit was absolutely enormous. Public service, the building community, the biking community, the local government. A better person I could have not known, and I will miss him greatly.
Yeah. Well said, Patrick.
I visited with a family last Saturday, and I thought it was important to share with you all because Pat made a point of telling all of us that were there. There was some rumors that Andy fell on his bike, and that might have led to his heart attack. But she wanted us to know that Andy did not wreck his bike, that a fatal heart attack could not make Andy wreck his bicycle, which I thought was pretty awesome. Andy, we love you. We will miss you. Stay safe, everybody. Take care of those you love. Let them know it. Happy building.